The
tanks
US
didn't even have night
obviously
vision.
has.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
know,
like
like
yeah,
that's what I guess.
Russia definitely has a harder time. But like Wyatt, like you said you're neutral, but like, do you have like any particular opinion about like moral standing? Like, I understand that you like objectively report like what's happening, but do you any belief? Do you have any belief in what like in the background of the war, like what Russia believes happened in Ukraine and like you know U.S. involvement and all that? Do you believe in that?
Yeah, of course. The entire war. I even wrote about this because before DPA becomes like exploded on YouTube, right? DPA is mostly on the website. So I do write articles. I invite people to write. I used to have a partner who write a lot, but all his articles was already deleted. So I did write about the Ukraine war. I was warning that um, the if they do not take Russia seriously, Russia is going to do really go to war in some way or form. Although I did not expect them to invade directly into Ukraine, I was expecting them to do the Georgian war way. They actually enters through the breakaway regions, and then and then attack from that angle. But apparently they are not underestimating the Ukrainians, I guess, which is why they felt that there's a need to attack from other angles, because as we can see so far, the Donbas line is really hard to break. So, probably this is the reason why the Russians actually decided to open three new fronts or four new fronts. They have Sumy, Kiev, or Sumy, Chernihiv, then they have Kharkiv, and then they have the southern front, the Crimean front. Uh, so that was what happened. Of course, the West wanted the war for two main reasons. They wanted Russia to get stuck in their own Afghanistan again. And the other one is that NATO is struggling to get relevance. Because if you notice that even during Trump's era, Trump was threatening the Europeans to spend more in NATO, and he barely succeeded in a way. So because he threatened that USA will withdraw from NATO should they not put in their commitment to the 2%. So everybody decided that okay, we will put in the 2%, but over 5 years. So they will take 5 years to reach that 2% mark, or sometimes longer, depending on which country. And Trump managed to do it in that sense. But it's not even 5 years, then suddenly this war broke down. So NATO suddenly, because no one really thinks Russia is a real enemy or real threat, which is why NATO is fading in terms of importance and relevance. And they wanted this war. So when this war happened, suddenly you can say, you see, Russia is the threat. And then suddenly you see every country is militarizing in Europe. Everybody is spending way more money than they ever did for probably the past 10 years into military. So the military industrial complex is very happy. US is very happy because more people is buying their weapons. And then suddenly for Germany is like militarizing. So all these things, there's reasons. People are just all these parties, the governments, the military industrial complex, NATO, they are just using Ukraine an excuse so that every country can have the excuse to spend money into military. If not, politically, it's not possible to convince your population or even your parliament, opposition MPs that you should spend more money in the military. No one is spending much money in the military except for those countries near to Russia, like Poland, the Baltic states. Otherwise, or maybe Serbia. The rest of the Western, Central, and Western European countries, they are all not spending enough money in the military. I think even the UK, their military is like in disrepair. Germany is horribly disrepaired. So that's the reality. So with this Ukraine war, a lot of people is very happy, and a lot of new rich people, I guess.
But like it's like they forgot the 2014 Crimea annexation. Like the reaction wasn't as bad as this one. There were sanctions and everything, but even like before this war, like in January, like nobody remembers Crimea. Like It's like Europe went back to do business as usual. But do you believe, like, there will be, like, again, going back to business? Maybe not soon, but maybe in 5 years or something. Like Europe, because Europe, it's clear that they cannot do without Russia's energy in some way or form, if they want to stay competitive. That is. So, like, what they're gonna do? They have no choice. They have to, like, sort of deal with Russia.
So wait So the how do I put it? Ukraine, right, is always been the backwater. They like nobody really give a damn about Ukraine like since forever. So and which is why the entire 8 years of the Donbas civil war, the Ukraine civil war, no one really cares. That's the reality. And so which is why suddenly when the Malaysian airline got shot down, people suddenly wait, there's still a war there happening. And then they just point at fingers everywhere. Nobody knows what is actually happening, who is actually capable of shooting down such an airline. Everything is just not important. It's just used for geopolitical and political needs. So that's the reality. Now things are different because the war is becoming too hot, and the energy crisis is also becoming too hot, and then they will become too cold. So it's not going to be go back to normal. It's not possible anymore because they have to make a decision now. Do you want to take care of your own country's interests, or do you just want to play this Western or US NATO-led agenda to support Ukraine? Because as far as I can tell, ever since Russia is out of the Soviet Union, Russia has not done any bad things to Europe, as far as I can tell. So we cannot mix Russia as the same Russia as per the Russia inside Soviet Union. It's two different countries, because the Russia inside Soviet Union actually have not much power. The power actually resides in the Soviet Union. So now Russia as a separate country, so far I haven't really exactly seen them do bad things per se in Europe, or at least against the West. So this paranoia, right, is killing themselves, as far as I can tell. Because similarly, it's just
DPA.
DPA. Why?
I got a question. DPA. What do you think about the war continuing? So like to my viewpoint, I feel like there's like a lot of cards that Russia could play, including the gas card, where if Germany goes into recession, most of Europe will be in recession, and Russia mobilizing, but I'm not sure when that's going to happen.
Nope, Russia is not mobilizing. Russia is not mobilizing. But
I mean, when has Putin really changed his strategy mid-war? He didn't do it in Syria, and they faced quite a lot of defeats in Syria. The Russians did, and they definitely pressured Putin to change his strategy. And I know a lot of like Telegram bloggers are kind of pointing towards that, kind of like a full mobilization, like thus Putin changing his strategy. But like, I feel like he doesn't really have a track record of doing that.
No, Putin is a
So
very
I feel like nothing's really going to change.
Putin is a very pragmatic person, and he's very principled. I'm not sure if I think the people who are pro-West don't think so, but from my observation, right, he's very, very principled. Like, he don't do things for no reason. Usually he's very, very, very patient. Like, for example, Turkey shot down the Russian plane, the Russian fighter over Syria. What did Russia do? Russia did not do anything to Turkey, because they understand that any action, any retaliation against Turkey means war. And Russia, they don't really want to go to war and unnecessarily. So, but in terms of this energy crisis, the Russians are already getting more and more pissed off, and they have already shut down the energy the gas pipeline. So that is already an escalation. Although this is nothing compared to what the US is sanctioning on Russia. So it's not that bad. But things is good. So Russia's strategy, as far as I can tell, is that they're waiting. They're waiting for Europe to collapse on their own. So as winter gonna come, the political pressures on the various European countries, especially those are very anti-Russia, it's going to be under tremendous stress. The protests are already happening in certain countries and cities. It's going to get worse as this energy crisis going to break people's bank. I mean, how can energy, your power, electrical price go up by 20 times? That is nonsensical, right? So like it's not like there's war in Middle East. The war in Ukraine doesn't really even affect oil and gas, technically speaking. So but they sanction Russia and caused energy crisis for themselves. So it's very hard for the politicians to explain to their people that it is their burden to bear. So we shall see. I think that's why Putin, even for this Kharkiv defeat, it is actually also part of a calculated plan, in the sense that they have certain thresholds. They know that, okay, for example, if certain things happen, we will withdraw from this line. If certain things happen, we will withdraw from this line. They definitely have this sort of defensive plans, although that it still looks very bad, because they know it's very clear by the geography. You know where you can hold. Where's the line? Just like right in the first month, you see where the Russians proceeded to, where they invaded to, and then where they stopped. This line was already decided before they started the operation. They already know where they want to go, because they know where is the area that they can defend with the least amount of troops. So when they withdraw from Kharkiv, from Izium, from Balaklia, the next line they can defend is actually the Oskil River. So it's just natural for them to just withdraw everything. And so even like the northern part of Kharkiv, they see no more point being there, because that is only part of the diversion, or to make it really long, the front line, to strain the Ukrainian logistics. But with the fall of the Balaklia area and Izium area and the northeast part of Kharkiv Oblast, then there is no more point of holding. So they just withdraw from the entire of Kharkiv Oblast. And for the really pro-Russians one, they will say that this is all part of the plan. But it is, in my opinion, is a plan that they would ideally not want to do if they have a choice.
So I guess it's solace in a really what looks to be a fairly critical collapse of the Kharkov front, but so what do you think Russia will do to resolve the whole situation with Kharkov? Because a huge sudden push, Ukraine is gonna lose a lot of manpower from that, but the territorial gains, then the fact that they're holding Izium, a strategic point, it could hurt the Russian strategy if what is presumed to be the Russian strategy, that is to crawl slowly and take things in a sort of gradual manner. But in any ways, what is your take on this?
Okay, but I'm not sure if any of you guys ever heard me saying this, probably earlier in the war, that I said that Kharkiv was never part of the plan. They never, this is my opinion, that Kharkiv was never part of what the Russians want. And it was only because that because of all the report of the SBU going to kill or arrest or capture or whatever, torture, whatever, all these alleged collaborators with the Russians, the civilians, that the Russians decided to change their strategy or the plan. Because from my observation, I always thought that they never wanted Kharkiv. They were there just like they were there in the northern front is just to strain the Ukrainians. And but because of after the withdrawal, I believe, I'm not sure it's which one. I think it's northern front one. After the northern front withdrawal, a lot of the atrocities was reported, allegedly happened, and then it was kind of confirmed in a way after they withdraw from the north of Kharkiv city, and then it seems like the Russians made a very determined point to hold whatever territory in Kharkiv that they can. And then that's why they also talk about giving Kharkiv their own flag, the Kharkiv area that they control their own flag. They wanted to give them a Russian passport. They wanted to introduce Russian curriculums into the schools, which they did. And this
Wait, did they implement the passport? Like they didn't
they planned, but I don't think that was done yet. I heard some people have it, but I don't remember seeing that it was done. But I saw some Telegram channel saying that some people have the Russian passport. So I'm not sure what's the reality in that sense. But I know that they did send teachers to be trained in the Russian curriculum, which means that when you do that, means you're actually quite determined to stay there for good. And then but it was very reluctant, because so how do I know it was it was not part of the plan? Because when they announced all these things, right, that the flag, the passports, the intention to train teachers, and then the currency changes, they introduced the rubles into Zaporizhia, Kherson. No, they did all these things in the south. They didn't really do this thing in the north, in the Kharkiv region. It doesn't seem like they wanted to do it. And then it was kind of reluctantly that they started to talk about sending Kharkiv teachers to train. And that's how I catch it, that they really actually originally don't really want Kharkiv, but something changed. Along the way, they decided that they need to keep these areas. So they started to do more. They started to do more, and then this collapse came. And then so which is why even the pro-Russian channels are very critical of this defeat, because this will actually erode trust in the Russians, especially by the people in Kharkiv. And in other regions that might be pro-Russia, they will be very worried about working with the Russians should the Russians take over their land, because they do not know if the Russian will stay. So that is that's what I actually gather.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
By the way, I'm recording all these things. I've since 18 minutes ago, kind of like 5 minutes after I came into the chat. So this will go on DPA IRL.
No way.
Oh, really? Thank
Oh,
you.
nice.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
That's cool. Put me in the
Because-
screen cap.
I'm gonna announce right now.
Because
Where is it going?
no,
DPA, what?
don't advertise.
Alter my opinion of you.
Don't advertise.
Pepsi or Coca-Cola?
Uh,
Pepsi or Coca-Cola?
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, that's a good question. Very good question.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, one
Did I
of those
hear
supports the armed
Coca-Cola?
forces of
Absolutely.
Ukraine.
Good guy. Good guy.
So
The
so
sugary refreshment.
Wait, hold on, Wyatt. Are you in the Singaporean military?
I was.
You have
I
to
always
be.
thought that you were.
Too many questions. One at a time.
Are you a veteran at least? I've always thought that you were. Not that
I was in
holding
the
against
I
you
was
if
a
you're not,
professional
but
soldier
I've
for
always
6
wondered.
years. I was professional. I was 6 years. 6 years in the army.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot more sense. Okay, your analysis makes a lot more sense then.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
was working within the intelligence umbrella. So
okay.
yeah, that's as much I can say.
Did you ever work with Americans? Question.
No, but my unit is classified.
Okay. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why I cannot say
I was
anything.
an MP, so I was in the U.S. military. It's always good to have like a military perspective on everything that we talk about, because it's very important.
Yeah.
Without it, I feel like you watch the Duran, right? Mercurius always says it. I'm not a military guy, right?
Mhm.
I'm not a military person, is what he says. And it's a very good point, because it's like being not a military person, you have to kind of disclaim that when you speak about like the war.
So
like on the
so
level
Yeah.
that you do. So it makes a
Yeah,
lot of
because-
sense.
so I also do tell people
Yeah,
that
because,
no,
like,
even if you are in the military for a long time, that doesn't mean that you know
most-
things. That doesn't really mean
Yeah,
you know
most-
things. Yeah. Who is talking?
No,
actually?
absolutely. But you
most
understand how
YouTubers,
military can
like,
fail. Go ahead. Sorry.
don't like aren't part of a military, though. Yeah, like I was saying, there's a lot of YouTubers on, say, YouTube that like talk about military matters but don't exactly clarify this, so it gives people the impression that, or they're like people who study all about stuff related to military matters and etc., even though they're basically just armchair generals speculating from and stuff from what they read on I don't
Mhm.
know, Wikipedia and such.
But I would say that is actually very normal. Because like I said, even if you are in the military, it doesn't mean that you know everything. Like for
Yeah,
example, what
yeah.
if so for example, let's say you are in the military for like me 6 years, but your job is just purely infantry. How would you know anything about the tanks? How do you know anything about the navy, the air force, or the enemy, or no strategy? You wouldn't know anything of this because you are just a grunt. So so I would not also put too much into whether someone is in the military or not. I also would not discount the experience of someone in the military. For example, someone who is for example, they actually go to war, they actually fight in the front line. They will probably know much more than me about what is it actually like fighting in the front line, which I don't, because Singapore don't really go to war. But the thing is, it still comes down to the person himself. Do he read enough? Do he use logic to think enough? And then are they biased? Because I've seen a lot of even if they are very highly educated or they're in the military or what, they are actually very biased in their views. They are very affected or brainwashed by the media or the media diet that they have. So yeah, so I don't think it is people should worry too much about that. Like for example, I've been covering the war daily for 200 days already. How many so-called military experts out there would have known more than me, other than those that are already doing what I'm doing, covering the war on a daily basis? By right, there shouldn't be many people that should know as much as the few of us that are covering the war daily. So it has nothing to do with whether I was in the military or not. Maybe a little bit, but not that much. And I also think that experience can actually cause us to have misconceptions of things. For example, if someone who is so used to the American way of fighting war, viewing this war will find it very weird because the Russians fight differently. Their appreciation of what is victory or appreciation of how war should be fought is so different from the Americans. Yeah, so that's just my opinion.
Oh, one question. So, oh man, I forgot what I was supposed to say. You know how the Russians basically pulled out of Kharkiv and they basically like sometimes like the people who really support the Russians are afraid that they might get killed by the Ukrainians and all that. If Russia decides to go for Kharkiv, Sumy, and those areas, and some of them support them, uh, they would still be held back because they still don't trust. You're right. You just said that some of them won't really trust the Russians because they might leave again like they did. So it'll be a lot harder for them to actually hold a territory without the trust of the civilians and the
Mhm.
the people they're supposed to be protecting, because a lot of the people were kind of disappointed that the Russians failed to like protect Izium, and basically a lot of them had to leave their homes, which would probably be pretty hard for them, to be honest, because they're leaving everything they have and just leave their homes.
Yeah. So, but that's just how it is. So that's why the Russians are very conflicted.
Yeah.
They are very, very conflicted.
Like-
I'm sure that even their leadership is conflicted because this is a special military operation. This is not a war. They are not out to conquer by right. So no, if they keep worrying about the civilians, about all these people that they temporarily captured or conquered, then they will be crippling themselves, and they put their military in situations that will have a lot of casualties. Like even in this Kharkiv withdrawal, this so-called defeat, of course they have people who have died, got people who got captured, but relatively speaking, for the amount of land that they lost, the number of troops that they probably lose is not that much. So they withdraw to positions where they think that they can hold, like Sevastopol, at the eastern side of what's that freaking city? I forgot the city name. And then they were holding Liman. So it's the same amount of troops, but they withdraw to a location where they can defend better. It's a military consideration. The civilian side is a lot of headache. For example, even in the southern side, in Kherson and Zaporizhia, I can tell you they have a lot of problems, and we are not even talking about Donetsk and Luhansk. The Russians have a lot of problems trying to get the economy up and running properly, getting people to actually want to work in the government administration, because their people kept getting assassinated by the Ukrainian agents and saboteurs. And because the economy is not working, people are not getting enough money. Payment is problem, communication is problem. There is so much problems that they have to solve, even in the southern front, where they already have hell on for quite some time. So don't even talk about Kharkiv, where Kharkiv is so much more complicated, because it's still very much an active war zone for quite a bit. And then it is just, the more land you capture, the more administration problems you have. And Russia is not particularly a very well-run country. They themselves have a lot of bureaucracy problems, administration problems, corruption, and perhaps even the corruptions have come into the Ukraine as well. Definitely, I'm sure there's corruption involved. Perhaps they buy construction materials, and then maybe only a small percentage of it is not there, or the businessmen inflate the price by a lot, because it's very dangerous to send their workers into Ukraine. All sorts of things is actually very complicated. That the things that we are actually not seeing, because we are only looking at a war, but the rebuilding of all these locations is very difficult. And for example, they spend money and resources and workers to rebuild Mariupol. Mariupol currently they just built like 13 blocks or 12 blocks of apartments. Imagine the Ukrainians move in and capture it. That would be money entirely lost. So these are very huge considerations. Imagine they did this reconstruction in Kharkiv, and then now Ukraine took over it. It will be like an outrage within Russia, I would feel.
Knowing Ukraine, it will
You're right.
probably destroy it. Will destroy these buildings.
Yeah, probably.
Wyatt, what recording software and which editing software do you use?
I using OBS Studio for recording. Editing, I actually use After Effects, but I don't really do editing, because I have no time to do editing. I try not to do editing if I can, unless sometimes I may accidentally do something and I realize, shit, I have to do editing, and then that will increase the time spent on that stupid video for like 2-3 times. So I try not to do editing, because for those that do not know video editing, for every hour that you spend recorded, you need to spend at least 3 times the time to do editing. So every minute is 3 minutes of editing. So I could have finished that video in 1 hour, and I have to do 4 hours of work. So I try not to do editing, which is why all my videos are so raw, which is also why I make so many mistakes saying things. Like for example, tampon breach. So
Or vagina.
yeah, the vagina is on purpose.
Well, that's a certified DPA classic.
Vagina.
I mean, Do you think so? There's like, I've heard two different opinions. I've heard that it was pre-planned in Kharkiv and that it wasn't. I've heard from two different sides of like the pro-Russian aisle, kind of.
Mhm.
What is your personal opinion?
I think it's a
Like,
choke
was it
job.
pre-planned? Like, I kind of heard you touch
Personally.
on it a little bit. I think you.
Oh fuck.
What, it was kind of like a tertiary plan. Is kind of what you think, right?
So just like all our life,
Oh.
everything that we do in our own normal life, we do not plan just one plan and just put all our eggs in one basket and then hope for the best. We definitely for example, okay, for example, let's say we go to the mall. Okay, we plan to watch movies. So but we haven't bought the tickets, right? So we go to the movie, we said, okay, we're gonna watch Top Gun, for example. Okay, then we'll think, okay, if Top Gun is sold out or the seats are shit, we'll probably don't watch and then go bowling, for example. And then if the bowling alley is also full, then perhaps we will instead just go and eat at McDonald's and just forget it. Do you understand what I mean? It's all part of the plan. You plan to do all these things, but there's a priority. Which one comes first? So the priority probably at first is that they'll hold the line, and then if the line is not holdable, they will actually go to a different line. They will just give up the entire region, and then you go to the different line where they can actually hold the position. It's still part of the plan, but yet it's also not part of the plan. You understand what I mean?
Absolutely. And another question is, a lot of people, dang, hold on. I remember I had this written down somewhere.
These pepperoni sticks are so fucking good, man.
Huh? Sorry, sister, no, what you say?
They're pepperoni sticks, man. I got these pepperoni sticks from the fruit market, man, from this Russian guy. It was like $10 for these pepperoni sticks, man, but they're really good.
I cannot hear what you say. It sounds like you are eating something.
Pepperoni
He's talking
sticks.
about pepperonis.
Okay.
Man,
I was
I
like,
got
He's eating. Give him time.
I thought that I heard wrongly. I was like, what pepperoni?
What's really scary is that one of them might be the hot one, and it's gonna be very bad.
So for those that just came in, please note that I'm actually recording the session. I did miss the first 5 minutes when I came in because I didn't expect me to record. So, but I thought that we are having some interesting conversation, so I just thought that might as well record it and just put it on DPA IRL.
I'm just gonna
We're gonna be
quickly
famous.
plug pepperoni sticks into the thing here, the video.
Yeah, into the thumbnail.
Oh, pepperoni sticks, everyone.
Yeah, Russian pepperoni sticks.
My question is, can Russia actually recover from this big assault by Ukraine, or is this something that they may never recover from?
They didn't lose much troops, so they will recover from it. The question whether about recovery is, do we assume that the Russians want Kharkiv or not? So if the aim is actually to capture Kharkiv, then this is going to be a very hard thing to recover from, because to reconquer this much area of land is a big headache, because the Ukrainians have superior numbers, they got more soldiers, and they are really good at entrenching themselves and playing defensive war. So this is we already quite clear. We have seen this throughout this war that Ukrainians are really good at defending. So but if they never wanted Kharkiv, then they don't really lose anything. They only lose some troops, but of course they did lose quite a bit of troops, trying to get to conquer Izium, all this war to fight, in Kharkiv region, all these sacrifices will be wasted. But it's not crippling to them, but it's just a big waste of the soldiers that has sacrificed. If I'm a soldier fighting in the Russian military, and then I have brothers and comrades that have died, trying to conquer Izium, trying to conquer Balaklia, I will be pissed. I will be very, very pissed. Because if you're not holding it, then what the hell do we conquer it at the first place?
What do you think Russia's off ramp is for this war? What is their off ramp? How does Russia end this war? or a special military operation?
10 years.
I don't know, man. Because we can trust their initial words, when they just started the war, what they actually wanted to do, and then through actions we know that they definitely want to keep Kherson and most of Zaporizhia. Now I'm not so sure, because Ukraine have proved themselves to be rather irritating to the Russians. And for example, after the Kharkiv conquest from the reconquest from the Ukrainians, then Zelensky, or I think it's Zelensky, saying that they will only negotiate after we reconquer all of Ukraine and Crimea. And then that's why we see all the power plants getting bombed.
Then there's the issue, like, they say they want to reconquer Crimea, but they do realize it's like either they do or they don't realize that Russia considers Crimea to be like fully integrally Russian period, and that trying to reconquer it is essentially a declaration of war. Then again,
I think
Zelensky
it's
is
red
no
meat.
strategist, but
It's red meat to just keep the population encouraged in the war. It's propaganda. Red
well,
meat
that
for their
would
base.
that would definitely make sense.
So from my point of view is
Makes a
that
I
lot of
think,
sense.
like, if you look at the Sino-Japanese War and like World War II, there were a ton of secret negotiations that were running through the whole war that aren't really talked about because they aren't well known. It's like Japan, for instance, have been negotiating with China for a off-ramp to end the war since 1939, but Jiang Jieshi just did not want to end the war. And if Jiang Jieshi wasn't in power, Japan probably would have been, the war in China probably would have ended between China and Japan in 1940 or 1939 if Jiang Jieshi wasn't so, well, Zelensky-like.
It's Chiang
Jiang
Kai-shek.
Jieshi.
Oh, Wyatt's gone. No,
What's
he's not.
gone? I'm here. No, so my opinion is
I
that
have to ask,
what?
man,
Yes.
just before you emphasize your opinion, I just got one last question because currently my mouth's on fire from eating that very hot pepperoni stick. As an individual like yourself, collecting billions in FSB funding, where do you put this money?
What FSB funding?
Like offshore bank? Well, of course you're pro-Russian, so where does the FSB money go, Wyatt?
I'm paid by the Americans. What are you talking about?
So look, this guy's double teaming now. American and FSB funding. Where do you put all that money? Under the bed? Closet? Come on, what? Reveal some stuff to me.
It goes into the Singaporean social security system. Singapore has an amazing social security system.
No wonder this is so amazing. Why it's bucks are going into it.
Firstly, Singapore financially sanctioned Russia, so it's impossible they can get money from Russia. First thing first. Bitcoin. Yeah.
Bitcoin. Dogecoin.
Oh, sorry, why?
wait, they
I
pay you
remember my
in
question. I
cryptocurrency,
kind of want to
or
pivot
they
it to
pay in
Asia.
gold.
Why? What do you think about the United States and its plan to kind of turn a lot of countries like anti-China? What is your opinion on that, being from like
okay,
where
my
you are
opinion
in
is
Singapore?
the most of Asia is already anti-China without the Americans doing anything. So the people are just only noticing noticing China, and then the things that the bad things that China do, or the bad influence China have on the global economy or the global geopolitics. People only now then just realize. But in Asia, most countries don't trust China.
Asia.
Yeah, most countries don't trust China. It had always been like this. Even 30 years ago, it had always been like this. Americans or the West, they forget that China is communist, and but the Asians did not forget. Especially the countries that are bordering China, they are perpetually afraid of China, especially communist China, because communist China doesn't have a democracy. The going to war is just a matter of the leaders saying, "Let's go to war." They just make a division and they can go to war. It's not like it's not It's not like most democratic countries where going to war requires debate in parliament. So the most countries in Asia is always very wary of China, and it had always been the case, and which is also partly why Chinese people, the Chinese racial people in most of Asia, because they are always minority for most of in almost every country in Asia, they often are quite disliked by their majority people. So but Chinese tend to be very good at business, so no, the Chinese are always the rich people, so that kind of balance it out. But no, there's no change in terms of what I can observe. How for example Indonesia looks at China, how Malaysia looks at China, how Vietnam looks at China, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, South Korea, nothing have changed. It's the same situation it is today as per 20-30 years ago. The only change is that we are doing more business with China. That's it. It doesn't because the money is just there, the factories are there, and then but even when they invest money into China, they can't get the money out. Their intellectual property got stolen, the business idea got stolen. So the people the countries in Asia are just trying their best to stay alive and not lose too much when dealing with China. Otherwise to say USA is trying to make Asia become anti-China, that's just nonsensical. Most of Asia is always afraid of China. That's always been the case.
Wyatt, I have a question regarding China and Nepal doing a lot of damming in the region. And I was reading an article by the Lowry Institute about how once this dam project gets completed, India is going to be completely reliant on China's goodwill to keep water in the Ganges River. And basically China will have the ability to shut off all of India's water. Do you have any predictions about this kind of stuff that's going to happen in the next 20 years?
China is definitely trying to do this. They already done this to the Indo-China region. That means Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam. China has already done that to Southeast Asia, which is why there is a lot of water problems in Indo-China. That means in Cambodia, Laos, where the water flow have fallen by a lot, which actually affects the ecosystem. So this already happens in Southeast Asia, which is why ASEAN, the Southeast Asian Association, is in a very difficult situation because Laos and Cambodia is bought out by China, and then is in a very difficult situation where they even contemplated kicking out Laos and Cambodia by the big members like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. They even contemplating about it. So this is a real issue. But of course, this is what China does. Like I said, the whole of Asia is afraid of China because China always do this kind of thing. They are not friendly. China is not friendly country. So which is why they can do that to India, but that's why India is militarizing now. That's why India ignores the West, ignores NATO, ignores USA, and continues to build a strong relationship with Russia. Because the most high-tech weapon the Indians have are from Russia. From negotiation about the fifth gen fighters to their the BrahMos supersonic missile, which this version of missile was not given to the Chinese, only to the Indians. So the Russians are also playing a geopolitical game, trying to pit India against the Chinese as a balance of power. So if you guys have watched my balance of power lecture, you would have understand what I mean. It is important, right? Utmost important in foreign policy that you build a balance of power between countries. If you don't have the balance of power, then war will happen. And which is what happened in Ukraine.
Just wondering, how can they have achieve goals in, for example, BRICS or such organizations if there is no peace within? If the BRICS want to expand and continue cooperation, but then on the other side you have India and China that still have issues with each other. How this goals can be achieved if there is no peace.
There is peace now, right? They are not fighting war. So,
But like,
so
yeah, just they have always issue with the
because there's
border
always
dispute,
competition.
no?
There will always be competition between countries to countries. There's always conflicts and differences between country to countries. You just look at UK and the EU. They are enemies, man. The United Kingdom and the EU is not friends. They are enemies. They are competitors. So, but you see, they can still work together in NATO, in global affairs. So similarly, that's why you need the balance of power, because when you have a mutually assured how to say, not say destruction, but damage, if the two countries go into conflict, with this balance of power, nobody will dare to do something like that. Then you can focus on other things that is not war related, like trade, and other businesses and all this sort of thing. So there is peace now. So the way to maintain peace is to make sure that militarily you are actually on par. You are actually matching up with the Chinese. And if you aren't, for example, you're a very small country like Singapore, then it's important to continue to maintain a alliance or a coalition or partners that can all bind up together and then create a balance against China, which is why there is this so-called anti-Sino kind of grouping coming out, like the Quads. It exists purely because of the need to balance out against the Chinese. For example, India on their own, they cannot beat the Chinese. Neither can Japan, which is why Japan and India have this kind of like a very close partnership, which is mainly geared against the Chinese. But Chinese don't like it. But you see, that's the reality, because the more powerful China gets, then the more countries will have to bind together to balance it out. If not, then you're going to have a hegemonic situation like what Americans are, where they can just go to around the world and do whatever they want and kill a lot of people. And that's a problem when you don't have a balance of power against United States. Because when the Soviets are around, the Americans are not so crazy. Right?
Right. But like, what's the lesson that South Asian countries are getting from Ukraine? Like, I understand that they don't want to get too comfortable with China, but they must know that relying on the US is not a good option either, because they will end up like Ukraine. So like in the case of I remember there was like the issue with the US that was not able to find anybody to host missiles like in their countries or something to point against China. But is that because like they see Ukraine that relied on the US and how they are being screwed basically by NATO? Actually, let's just say that.
So you see, the difference is that so depending on which country you're talking about, different countries have a very, very different situation. For example, for Ukraine, they do not have a military alliance, so they only have words, verbal agreements, nothing official, which means that when Russia invaded, no one will come to their aid. Which is why I say it's a trap. They purposely sent Ukraine to die. That's how it is. For example, even in Singapore's situation, Singapore, we are not exactly in much of any of military alliance. I don't think Singapore is in any military alliance. So it is very dangerous for Singapore to take sides, to be honest. So that's why I'm not very keen or or very approve of what the Singapore government is doing, because we are verbally saying things that are very pro-West, very pro-Americans, and we are clearly taking a side. Especially with the Ukraine war, we sanctioned Russia, but we are not in a military alliance, which means that should Russia or China attack Singapore, there is no obligations in any country to come to save us. ASEAN is not a military alliance as well. So that's why in terms of when we look at the balance of power, we have to be very mindful that there is a difference between military alliance and simply having good relationship with countries, which is also why we are probably seeing is it Finland? Finland and Norway wanting to join the NATO, because they recognize that there is always this danger. They can stay neutral. Russia is not disturbing them, but there's always this danger that they see happen to Ukraine, that if they are invaded, all these so-called friends may not come to save them, which is why they are desperate to join NATO now.
Yeah, Finland and Sweden.
Yep.
Wyatt, one of the videos you did a while ago, I think a month ago, was covering kind of the balance of power
Yep.
in the South China Sea and going over every island. And I thought that was really cool. And I really hope you do more content like that in the future. Do you have any plans to do something covering kind of the Sinosphere in the near future? Because I think like a series on kind of explaining what China has and does not have, and kind of their allies in the region would be really cool.
I wanted to do a video on how what's the real, how weak China actually is. but I haven't got the time to actually prepare it to do it, because I need to do some research to make sure that my thinking is actually correct. Because from as far as I can tell, China is actually very weak. They are not that strong. They are strong on the surface, but their economy is actually actually super fragile, and it's actually already starting to break apart because they are very similar to Nazi Germany in 1936, 35. When Hitler was spending way too much money on infrastructure building. Do you all know?
Yeah, Albert Speer was basically in charge of the economy, and then like for all the business owners, you either cooperate with the Reich or the Reich nationalizes your shit.
Yeah,
and
so
that's like what Hermann Göring works kind of did.
So what the Nazi Germany done in a very superficial way to put it is that they built a lot of national infrastructure. For example, they built the highway, the autobahn. They hosted the Olympics. They built massive sporting arenas that even exist up to today. And then they remilitarized. They built a huge military, built huge factories to build all these new fighter jets. They spend money on building a new kind of tanks, new kind of fighters, new kind of ships. They also did what else? A lot of investment. But you see, none of these things makes money. That's a problem. The economic value of all these things are limited. And how do you build all these things is by taking future money. That means you print money, and then hope. So when we print money, we are actually taking money from the future. And if we do not use this money to generate economic returns or economic growth, then inflation will happen. And that's what happened to Germany. They borrowed or printed so much money that their economy is on the verge of collapse, which is why they go to war. It wasn't a choice for them. They had to go to war. And then when you go to war, when war happens, you can do a lot of shit and you can wipe out a lot of that. So, and then you can also capture a lot of new territory, new resources, and that can help you so-called grow your economy. So like for example, you spend money on military, you don't earn money from that unless you go to war. Because if you go to war, then your investment will have a return. So for the Germans, they have no choice. So we are seeing the same thing happening in China today. For the past 20 years, they have been spending way too much money in infrastructure. We are only not seeing the collapse so fast. It's because they're too big and they have a closed economy. The financial system, their currency system is closed. It's not exposed to the world. So, for example, you can't really easily buy renminbi, the Chinese yuan. It's not possible because it's a closed. The money is actually not in circulation globally. You cannot. So they built all these bullet trains. They built massive cities, new buildings. Many of them are highly inflated prices, and yet many of them are very poor qualities. So you build buildings that collapses, and which means investment gone. but the money is still being borrowed, or the money is still being printed. And then not to mention they every year they have massive floods. Every year they are losing infrastructures, which they need to spend money to rebuild again. And then they have droughts, and then they have chemical problems, then illness. They got all these kind of things, but we are not seeing the effect of this because the country is just way too big. They always have more money or means to cover up or to channel money around so that you can resolve all these problems. So in a way,
is this why China is building like bases in like Pakistan and spending money in East Africa for like infrastructure?
Okay, so this infrastructure is the Belt and Road, right? So what is Belt and Road?
Mm-hmm.
So China, they built everything internally, right? So they built everything inside the country. They already squeeze whatever they can squeeze out. There is no more. They can't really build more. So, and then like I said, they built a lot of all these things by printed money, by borrowed money. They don't really have the money, and they actually, a lot of these resources, right, to build all these things, they need to be imported. And if you import, you need to use real money to buy. Nobody wants renminbi. Nobody wants your printed yuan. You understand now? Like I give you yuan now. You wouldn't want it. It's useless. You can't use it. You can only use it in China. So it's a worthless currency. Especially nobody knows how much yuan, how much renminbi the China government has printed. It could be some stupid amount of money. So nobody wants the money. So but yet they need to generate economic growth. So they come out with this Belt and Road, which is a superb idea. So I now offer to lend you money. Okay, I offer to lend you money. I'm going to build a house for you. Also, but for countries, they are talking about building roads and factories and harbors and airports, exhibition centers. But for example, for easy understanding, okay, I'm going to lend you money now to build a house for you. But there's a condition. You must use my worker. You must use my resources. That means my building resources, my building materials. And then you have to pay whatever I tell you how much it costs. So which means that I say I lend you $100,000 to build a house. Then I take the $100,000 and immediately give it back to myself. Because you have to pay for the materials, right? You have to pay for my workmanship. So essentially I lend you money, but actually the money is, I never lend you any money. The money is still with me, but now you owe me money. And then you get a house, which might not be useful for you. Is that a very bad example?
So what China is doing is they're delivering a product, but they're basically paying for that product themselves. They're giving other people renminbi
at cost
and then
price.
They're demanding the repayment like pretty much immediately.
So at cost price. So you must understand, okay, the only thing that actually costs real money for China is the materials, the building materials. That they need to spend real money to buy. The workers are sent from China to the work site, and they are being paid with China money, and they are not being paid. They are basically slave workers essentially, because they are being paid China money, and China money is worthless. They can print as much as they want. So that's essentially free workers. So they basically only spend money on the materials, and then maybe for some flights and some oil, maybe food. That's it. And then they build the thing for you. You owe them a full 100% sum of that product that was priced up to China, up to price. So
wouldn't it make sense for China to saturate a local economy with renminbi so that the renminbi gains worth in other economies, and thus it will gain value at home?
No, because if you allow the currency to trade overseas, then your currency will be tradable, which means that your currency will be exposed to the outside world, which means that there is a chance of a capital outflow. That means you may lose money, and you probably will lose a lot of money. And basically, they do not want people to know how much money they printed. It's a secret.
I see. So China wants to peg the value, and it's
Okay.
kind of ironic because it's not, the value doesn't float, and it's pegged by the
It's pegged to the US
Communist
dollar.
Party.
Yeah, it's pegged to the US dollar for whatever money. So everything is fake. So put it this way. For example, I hire a worker. Okay, so we do business in US dollar. But for example, I don't pay my worker in US dollar. I pay my worker in DPA dollar. I made up this currency myself. So then they can use the DPA dollar to buy food from the DPA cafeteria. So it's something like voucher. Everything is only within the company. So but every time I sell something from my factory, from my shop, I get US dollar, and then I use US dollar to just buy the food and the materials, but then I will not pay my workers US dollar. I will pay them DPA dollar. You understand the situation? It's basically just fake money.
Yeah, you're basically you're using monopoly. You're paying people's monopoly money
Yep, correct.
or credit, and then you actually keep the money that has
Correct.
value.
So the country, the government, the CCP, the Communist Party keeps the real money. That's where they can actually use the money to buy things that are really they need. For example, high tech chips, buy oil, buy gas, buy food, buy grains. They need the real money to buy all these essentials that they do not have enough of, or they do not produce. Everything else is funded by fake money, is by monopoly money.
So what you're saying is that what's the word? China has no intention of replacing the dollar,
They can't.
or at least in the next 50 years.
In the short term, they can't. And the thing is, most countries know that this is the situation, which means that if you do a currency swap with them, your money is essentially trapped or gone. That is the danger, because anyone who really understand how the Chinese economy works would probably identify that it's actually a scam in a way. So but this is my opinion, of course. I might be wrong. For example, so I'm not saying that I'm an expert in all this, but this is my observation. So which is also why you see China tourism, right? China always limits the number of people allowed to go overseas. Going out of China is very difficult. Bring money out of China is very difficult. Like for example, you can do a business in China, earn a lot of the yuan, the renminbi. You can earn a lot of the China money, but when you want to withdraw the money out to your own country, you'll find that it is nearly impossible. It's very, very difficult. You have to go through a lot of bureaucracy and administration just to get the money out. So anyone who can bring a lot of money out, they tend to be part of the Communist Party. They are party members, and for those people that are able to manage to get any money out, they are not going back to China. They are just like migrating, which is why you always see a lot of very rich Chinese people from China. They're buying a lot of those very expensive property because it's very hard to get money out. So they finally get the money out. These are real money that they get out, because the moment you take the money out of China, that it becomes real money. But then, which also means within China, there's lesser real money. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I know, because all the money goes directly to where I live. They buy all the property, and then nobody who actually lives here can live here.
Yeah, because
California or Detroit?
but
Canada,
you know why they do that because
Vancouver.
possibly, yeah.
the why they do that is because the money outside of China is real. If they buy a house in Vancouver, they know that the value will stay there. It will continue to hold value of the money. In China, everything is fake. So the money, if you keep money in China, anytime the Communist Party can just take the money from you, they can. You buy a house there, the house actually is not freehold, which means the house after 60 years or 90 years, it will go back to the Communist Party. Nothing is permanent. You can't really keep anything. So when they can bring the money out, they will bring the money out.
This is why I want the CCP, the Canadian Communist Party. And we're just gonna take
Why
all
do you
the
want?
money.
Why you want that?
I mean,
But then, like, what is the reason for, like, let's say China doing some bilateral trade in yuan? Like, is that like a good thing for their economy? Like, if Russia buys, okay, no, if Russia sells gas and China pays in yuan, like, is that good for them?
It's good for China. It's mutually beneficial. I tell you why. Because right, Russia can't really buy anything from the West now, correct? So they need to buy a lot of things from China. So even though Russia know that the Chinese money is monopoly money, but they can use this monopoly money to just buy real goods from China. So it's not that bad. And China can also use this monopoly money, right, to buy real oil and gas from Russia. So that helps, right? So it's mutually beneficial in that sense. Do you all get what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's a mutual trade. So no one actually have to keep each other's money for real. It's just we exchange the money, we do the currency swap, and then we are actually still getting real goods. So essentially it's like barter trading. Russia is using oil and gas in exchange for Chinese goods. The currency is just a medium where they do the exchange.
Oh, I see. So
Yeah.
then Russia buys material from China in yuan.
Correct. It's just barter trading. Essentially, it's like barter trading. So if you do a currency swap with a country that doesn't produce anything, then you're dead. Because the country will be printing money, and then you can't buy anything from them.
So if the Chinese economy were to falter, would it look like Japan in like the 90s? And where like you just have this massive economic overheating?
I think you will look a lot more okay. So for me, there are some I know there's a YouTuber who is a economics teacher. He said that it will look like the Japanese stagflation. My opinion is probably that or worse, or it could look a lot more like a massive collapse, like the subprime crisis. So because like I said, China is printing so much money. Everything is a bubble now in China. Everything is a bubble. So because everything is fake, right? So everything is a bubble. That's why you are seeing the real estate companies are falling apart, because they are unable to pay the debt, and this debt are real money. They have to pay real money, correct? Because the money is coming from overseas, right? They borrow the money, they buy the stuff and whatever. They have to pay back the loans, and all these loans and bonds are real money, and they don't have real money to pay back. Which is also why the Chinese Communist Party can't really save them. They are probably going to let them die. And if you're going to let enough companies die, then your economy is gone. So currently, they are, as far as I can tell, the China is fighting fire. But I'm not sure how they will collapse, because they have been very resilient. I thought that it would collapse a few years ago, last year, the year before, but they never collapsed. So I learned my lesson. I have to accept that China is actually very, very resilient, but probably because they are a closed system. So everything can be covered up and faked, and they can print money to solve a lot of problems. But so what should we be watching is their trade. If their trading drops or falls, their country will be in deep shit, because that means no real money is coming into China. Then they will be in deep trouble, because they need the real money. The everything else inside is all fake. Like I talk about, or my company, I all pay them only monopoly DPA money, because everything can continue to run, you see. But the moment I have no business, then I have no business, I cannot sell things. That means I'm not getting enough real US dollar in, which means I cannot use the US dollar to buy food for my staff. That means I can't pay so my staff will have DPA money but they can't be fed. They have no food. So they have useless money. So and then they'll go hungry, and then what they do, they'll start to assassinate me. So that will probably what will happen in China if the trade continue to fall, which their trade is already falling because they self-imposed problems like the COVID restrictions and everything. So the trade war by Trump actually damaged them a lot, to be honest. So we shall see what will happen next.
I wrote a paper about the trade war, so I was curious about like what you thought about I guess the Chinese economy as a whole.
So so my opinion of the Chinese economy is just purely it's very, very dependent on the trade. That's all. Like what I said just now, the examples. Without the trade, without real money going to China, they will collapse very fast. They are not Russia. You see what's happening to Russia now, right? The sanctions apply on Russia. Russia will not die, They are very resilient because they produce everything. They can literally don't import things and they will still not die. Just that they will become very low tech for a lot of things, because a lot of things, consumer goods, they still need overseas, which is why they are buying from China, because China have all these consumer goods. But China is a different thing. They do not have the resources. They do not have oil or enough oil. They don't have enough coal. They do not have enough. Literally, they have not enough of everything, which means that without selling things to overseas, they don't get the real money in, then they cannot buy real things. Then they'll be in deep shit. Which is why the trade war, during the trade war, Trump's sanctioned, or the trade war against China is so threatening to China. It just that the trade war did not damage China's economy at all, but it put China on notice, because under Trump, US economy grew tremendously. The economy was doing extremely well. Everybody is earning more and more money. The unemployment is all-time low. Salary is growing for the first time in a long time. In fact, despite Trump being so-called anti-immigrant, he actually say that there is not enough immigrants, and they are actually opening up more spaces because there's just too many jobs, and then the people are not filling it up. So, and under that kind of situation means people buy more. The consumers buy more goods and buy more things. And where are all the things made? Most of them is made in China, which is why Chinese economy under Trump's time actually grew. So it's a kind of very weird situation where US sanctioned China, and yet China economy grew. But the difference is that the US government actually earned a lot of tax dollars from that sanctions.
When the US sanctioned China, it only sanctioned 2 or 3 industries.
Yeah.
And this is more of a global ban or a global tariff on steel and aluminum. And I think aluminum was really important to the US, because if they didn't sanction aluminum, then the only US aluminum factory that produced materials for their fighter jets would have closed down. I cannot remember what the company is called, because but for steel, like the US steel industry didn't actually improve. It's just that China got cut out of the US market, and it made US products more competitive. But the steel industry in the United States did not recover despite Trump's efforts. So, well, the trade war did kind of put China on alert. The actual economic ramifications within the United States and those sectors that were supposed to be protected didn't really improve.
But you see, there's no choice. If you actually look in a very pragmatic way, that means no emotion, you're not anti-Trump or not anti-US or not anti-China. You look at purely the reality is that if China is operating steel factories and aluminium factories or whatever, factories with free labor, because like I said, they are just paying them monopoly money, right? Then there's no way any other countries around the world can compete, because their goods will always be cheaper, forever be cheaper. Not to mention that China actually can adjust the currency at any time. Up to them. They can peg to US dollar. They can decide what is the exchange rate. Because I believe they were pegged to US dollar, right? I'm not sure if they're still pegged, but no, they were pegged to US dollar, and they can just decide what rate it is because it's just monopoly money. So for example,
I understand the. Oh, go ahead.
So it's like I issue a cryptocurrency which is the DPA dollar, something like that. Then I think one DPA coin is $1 US. I can decide that I say it's $10 US. It doesn't matter because it's all fake money.
I see.
Yeah. So
what I understand, like the US is trying to keep these sectors alive, the steel and aluminum. So even if they don't see any growth, they're at least alive because they don't want any more shrinkage there. And if I remember correctly, the Democrats in power are maintaining the trade policy towards China, even if they're not taking any more steps to reduce the trade deficit.
But then, like, what is keeping the U.S. Economy afloat? Like, if you compare with China, even the U.S. is like fake money. Like they're printing money like anytime they want, like to reduce whatever.
So it's to control like inflation, like the Fed.
So the difference,
what's the difference?
So the difference is that the US dollar, when they print money, the whole world pays for it. You understand what I mean? For example,
because it's open currency, right?
Correct, because it's a global reserve currency. So everybody uses US dollar. Everybody trades with US dollar, which means that US dollar is purely dependent on the growth of the entire world. That's the difference between the US dollar and any other currency. So for example, like I said, if China print money, they are borrowing money from the future of China, the future Chinese generation. So they need to use this money to develop the economy, to have economic growth, so that they can repay or to maintain the money, the value of the money, because they are borrowing money from the future. So if they don't grow the economy, then the money will lose value. So then you get inflation. US dollar does not require the growth of US economy. US dollar requires the growth of the entire global economy. That's the difference. So United States can continue to print money as long as the whole world continues to grow. As long as there's global growth, they can continue to print money. That is the cheat code that USD, which is also why they unpack from the gold, because this is like this literally free money. So when US dollar when US print money, they literally can buy things from overseas for free, essentially. It's basically cheat code.
It's not really free because when they buy things from overseas, it directly affects local industry.
Yeah, but you see,
that directly impacts like local economy for the US.
Correct. But the thing is, US dollar does not depend on US economy. It depends on global economy. So US dollar as a currency is unrelated to the US economy itself. So for Trump, he wanted to grow the US economy, but for the Democrats, they don't really care. It does not matter. They can outsource or they can offshore literally everything to China. It does not matter to them, because as long as there's global growth, there's global trading growth, US dollar will continue to have value. Then the big companies will continue to earn money. So it's that kind of thing. So it's kind of weird, which is why US can have a stupid amount of debt and their country will not collapse, because the whole world is paying for it.
Some of the people I know, one of my friends in Turkey was telling me that all of their savings accounts have switched entirely, like we're switching over to like the US dollar, the banks were, as opposed to the Turkish lira, which was like helping cause like the massive inflation in the lira. And then, if I remember correctly, Erdogan was trying to shut that down and was trying to take control of the banks, but that's kind of unrelated to China itself.
Because no choice, right? Because Turkey is also okay. So like we say, if you print money, means the money value will drop, which means Turkey actually printed a lot of money. That means they printed a lot of money to do artificial growth or they do constructions or whatever, or investments into infrastructure, something like this. So we not sure what Turkey actually spends on. Maybe it's a war in Syria, which is causing them a lot of money. So maybe that's what happened. Then and for the banks, who want to put money in the bank if your money will just continue to disappear? So which is why changing to US dollar might be a good solution for the banks, but which also means that they will be selling they will be using Turkish money to buy US dollar, and which means the dollar will continue to grow against the Turkish dollar. So it's just quite complicated, the finance economics things. Which means the Americans can basically go inside Turkey and just buy out everything, in a way. So it's been 1 hour 20 minutes. So I'm probably gonna go soon. Hello.
Nobody else has any questions?
Yeah. Nobody want to chat anymore. This is not a podcast,
I have a question.
我有觉得那个新加坡的那个总统的那个
什么啊？ Hello.
Oh, my question, Wyatt, was are you like Malaysian or Chinese, or because you look really Chinese?
I'm Singaporean Chinese, so
that makes sense. Okay.
So people kind of very confused. When in Asia, when we say Chinese, right, is the race, Chinese race. So just like you have the the Negroes or Japanese, it's just a race. Korean is also a race, something like this. Also is, but Chinese kind of get it a bit complicated because China also call themselves Chinese as a nationality. So in Asia, we tend to call them China Chinese, especially in Singapore, or PRC Chinese, or PRC citizen, or whatever. So they are China Chinese. So you have American Chinese, right? So you have Malaysian Chinese, you have Singaporean Chinese, Indonesian Chinese, Filipino Chinese, Thai Chinese. No, every country have Chinese. So it is just the race, it's not the nationality. So China have its own Chinese, and they are very different from the rest of the Chinese people in Southeast Asia. They're very different. In fact, Southeast Asian Chinese are a lot more closer to Taiwanese Chinese, which is also China Chinese because they are Republic of China. But we are a lot closer than them. China Chinese is very different now because of the Cultural Revolution, the communist rule, and the closed economy, the closed system, closed border for so many years. So they have already evolved into the very different people. And then because they have no religion, for most cases, and they become very materialistic. China Chinese are super materialistic, which makes them rather dangerous. And their education system is highly competitive, super duper competitive, because you are talking about such a big country, and then to be a scholar means you have to be you have it so much more difficult than maybe someone in Singapore, because Singapore is just one city, right? If you want to be a scholar in China, you are talking about thousands of cities. So in China, education is highly competitive. So the culture there is very different. They are very stressed. They are highly competitive. And then they are very small because the population is just too big. So they also kind of like very give up on their politics kind of thing. They are like very indifferent to the Communist Party. They just simply just want to earn money, and all these things makes them a very different people. Their behavior, their personality is very different from let's say Singaporean Chinese. So we can't really relate to them. It's very difficult. We can relate very well with the Taiwanese, but with the China Chinese, it's so hard. And they always bind together. The China Chinese, when they're in Singapore, they always bind together. They don't really mix with Singaporean Chinese that much. So it's just different people, so different people.
That's something I noticed
Oh.
as a Chinese person living in the United States, or at least like a Chinese person born in the United States.
Mhm.
Like I talked to some people they're like from the Philippines. Like I asked if they're like from Luzon because I noticed that like a lot of people from Luzon
Mhm.
are like Chinese. And then I know that like Malaysia had a whole civil war over the China, like because the local Malaysians and the local Chinese didn't get along. So I was just wondering, like, do you see I was gonna follow that question up with like, do you consider yourself Chinese or would you like consider yourself Singaporean? And I know a lot of people usually, at least a lot of Chinese people I know, usually affiliate with like their local culture.
So okay, how to put it? In Singapore, right, it's always Singapore first, then Chinese. That's why we call ourselves Singaporean Chinese. We don't call
I
ourselves
see.
Chinese Singaporean. But in the United States, it's the opposite. They always say
Mhm.
Black American, Chinese American, Latino American, Latin American. You know, because in the United States, race comes first. Vietnamese American. So that's what the Americans, they are too racially conscious. So it's always the race
So
comes first. But in Singapore, it's the nationality comes first. Because
so
nothing,
if China was to invade Singapore, would you be on the side of Singapore?
of course,
Interesting.
Singapore is rather anti-China, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Wyatt，
Yes.
Wyatt，我有个问题，就是为什么李光耀的那个经济政策这么好？你可以用英文跟他们解释。
Oh, so he asked, why is the Lee Kuan Yew's economic plans or ideas so good? So, um, how to put it? Singapore succeeded because the rest of the neighbors are not focusing themselves on the economy that much. I would put it that way. For example, let's say if Singapore is next to China, we'll be dead. We'll be dead. So the reason is because Indonesia is very corrupted, Philippines very corrupted, Malaysia is pretty much becoming very corrupted. Thailand is somewhat, but it's still alright. But and especially in the beginning of when Singapore just gained independence, we have rather good infrastructures, we have rather good systems already, and we are just building on our strengths, and then we invite investors in to invest, and then when they invest, they train our people gain the knowledge, and we are able to build our own industries. And this is what Singapore did, and because nobody else do it, that's why we succeeded. So that's why Singapore is what it is today. So China, right, Deng Xiaoping, right, came to Singapore.
那李光耀说就是他不是说就是在英文说 work hard play hard， 对不对？就是那样子的，比新加坡的别的国家围着新加坡的，为什么会这么？我都不知说怎么说，为什么新加坡会这么改变呢？
从什么改成什么？从什么东西改成什么东西？ So basically asked that how Singapore managed to change so much. It's just survival. So I will just say it's survival because Singapore is really weak. We are very small. Our population is small in comparison to our neighbors. So we have to work extra hard. That's it. Until today, it still remains the same. So we are very successful now. We have a lot of money, a lot of reserve, and a very powerful military, but it's the same problem. We are still very small. So if let's say we go to war, we don't really have place to retreat to. So Singapore works very hard, and that's it. So I was trying to talk about Deng Xiaoping because Deng Xiaoping, he was the premier in China, so he visited Singapore and Lee Kuan Yew hosted him, and Lee Kuan Yew basically toured him around Singapore and basically gave him advice about China, about opening up China, about how Singapore did it, because Singapore is during Lee Kuan Yew's time in the early days, we are like a half communist country essentially, so we use a lot of centralized systems. Even today, we still have a lot of centralized systems, but we embraced capitalism and open market economy, and basically Lee Kuan Yew at the time, the former Prime Minister of Singapore, basically taught and advised Deng Xiaoping about this. And then Deng Xiaoping went back to China, and then he announced the opening up of China, and then that's where we see the China today getting developed. So the China today, right, is like an extreme version of Singapore. Basically, a lot of the things that China do copied from Singapore. For example, they have the one-child policy. One-child policy actually is copied from Singapore because Singapore had a two-child policy. Singapore, no, then you see China become the factory of the world because of all the offshoring. This actually is also learned from Singapore because Singapore attracted investment from overseas. We give them a lot of advantage. We have good, well-trained, well-educated workforce, and then all these foreign countries invested in Singapore, built factory here, and then we actually gain economically because of this. China did exactly the same thing, but in a billion times bigger, just like a crazy amount of times bigger than Singapore. Then Singapore basically have centralized systems, which China also did the same thing. Singapore is very clean. China also did the same thing. So China, if you go to major cities in China, it's very clean. It is probably cleaner than Singapore sometimes. So also all sort of this kind of thing. And for many years, China have been sending civil servants to Singapore for training for many years. So the Singapore actually contributed to the monster that we are seeing today, partly, which is also explains why there's actually a very good relationship between Singapore and China, until we got backstabbed by China when they actually took Singapore's armored vehicles that was transported from Taiwan back to Singapore, because we do military exercises, trainings in Taiwan, and then when on the way back, while the ship was in Hong Kong, it was actually impounded, and then it actually impounded our armored vehicles, and caused a diplomatic situation between Singapore and China, because Singapore has been very vocal about China's claim about South China Sea. So yeah. Any more questions? If not, I'm going to go already because it's been like 1 hour, 30 minutes. I need to go and work. Any more questions?
It sounds like it's it.
We'll let you go. We'll let you go, Wyatt.
Okay, you guys have fun.
Wyatt.
You're a busy guy. Thank you
get
so
to go
much.
to work.
Okay, bye guys.
We love you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Have a good one, Wyatt.